Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on the current news and affairs with our commentator and economist, Mr. Jargal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm your host, Namsred Sindh. You can join in on our conversation on MNB World Facebook page and on Twitter with hashtag Jargal_Defacto. Now let's take a look at today's topics. The spring session adjourns. Housing program and mortgage loan. What is government and civil society partnership? Now let's take a look at our first topic for today. The Parliament's 2020 spring session started on schedule this year. However, due to coronavirus quarantine measures, sessions were held via video conferences. The last session of the current Parliament adjourned on 15th of May, and several important decisions, including the Vision 2050 long-term policy document, were approved during this spring session. So our first question is that what important decisions and laws were approved during this spring session?
Well, this is sessions of 7th Parliament of Mongolia. 11 times the sessions were held, and the total 1,400 laws and resolutions were approved. Parliament is the only institutions, the highest supreme right institutions that adopt laws. What is done? According to Mr. Zandang Shatar, the speaker, the Parliament, this Parliament will stay in history as the most innovative and creative Parliament. That's what he's saying. But how the history will judge is the business of history. This Parliament was an interesting Parliament, historic, of course, because they have approved the long talk, 20 years talked, discussed constitutions, amendments in the Mongolian constitutions. We will talk about that on the second issue. It is also approved because the People's Party have a monopoly seats, absolute power in this Parliament, 65 seats out of 76. It's true that they have lost 3 members out and their laws. The second specific is, it is the session, in particular, Parliament was the Parliament of coronavirus that infected about 5 million people as we speak of today in 210 countries and 334,000 lives. Mongolia has so far only 140 persons infected, no casualty, but still we need to be careful because we keep bringing Mongolians stuck abroad by charter flights, and the charter flight the students we brought from Moscow, from Russia, total 37, almost 72 of all cases are from Russia, this group, Mongolians, students studied in Russia. Well, this Parliament had adopted 2 laws related to coronavirus. One was about the keeping working jobs. The other one is supporting social status of people, social conditions of the people. For example, every child is receiving 100,000 tugriks per month, which was 30,000 before, and all employees almost were exempted from. Employers were exempted from paying the social insurance tax, which goes to the employees, which substantially increased, 30% or so increased their income, family income per month. So that's the situation for this. This is the work of this specific work of this Parliament. What is a particular interesting thing is done by this Parliament? First, 49% of the shares of Internet Corporation bought by a private group in the country, found illegal, and it stays in the ownership of the state. Also, they have decreased the pension age of the herdsmen. The mothers got more subsidies teachers as well. But they have also approved a law to make free, or law of paying or freeing pension loans of the country, and which made a lot pensioners who had not loan discriminated. And another thing what they have done is they have approved Vision 2050 for 30 years ahead, Mongolian plan, vision as a state. That's what is specific. I would like to highlight what is done. What is not done? Well, this parliament talked a lot about the decreasing of credit interest rate of the commercial banks, small talks. Nothing particular is done. Plus, it is not done by law. It is usually done by economic mechanism, which was not properly used. Second, there are many big scandal around corruption in the country, but none of the big scandal cases were solved through the court. They keep extending the courts all the way through. Probably they are waiting for next government. The third, the impression is that the country has like two prime ministers. The president was acting a lot on executive front of the state governance. The fourth, I would say, the parliament still has not been informing public how the laws are adopted, because according to laws, every law should be supported by research about the impact of the law, regulatory impact assessment, and the impact on other laws. Also, how much does it cost to implement the law? At least the speaker had not worked to inform us whether the research is done or not. Looks like it is not done. And the other thing is not done is every law, the people want to know who initiated the law, who and what group is initiated the law. And when there was voting for a particular law, we want to know later on, able to know who had voted for, who had voted against. That information is missing from the public website. That's what is done by this parliament.
So the newly amended constitution will come into effect starting from tomorrow. So yes. Could you tell us what are the most important changes to the constitution?
Well, this is long-awaited changes, which will be valid from tomorrow to noon, which suggests some interesting new changes in the society. Let me brief you some of them. The Constitution has 17 provisions, and out of them 19 are changed, 36 articles, 70 articles, 39 changed, including 36 provisions. 70, 19, 36. Important changes. First, about the land. Every wealth under the land, surface of the land, any proceeds from those wealth will be accumulated in National Sovereign Wealth Fund. Second, concerning political parties. Now, at least 1% of the voting population, which is around 20,000 people, to be a minimum amount for being classified as political party. But it will be valid from the next election, 2028, next election. Another long-awaited provision, the internal structure of political parties will be based on democracy principles, and party source of financing and way of spending will be public. Well, it is easier said than done. Let's see if in real life what will happen. Another important in terms of the budget discipline is the parliament cannot change the structure, cannot change the volume of income and or budget income and revenue and expenses only they can change the structure. If you increase in one place, then decrease in another place, which is long-awaited provision because they keep changing budget every time. About president, there is a change. President has a right to initiate law, but that frame of initiation will be regulated by a separate law, it says. And also Mongolian president, which was up to now twice for 4 years, were elected and extended, but not anymore, because the president will have only 6 years term, just once, and Mongolians over 50 years old, living 6 years at least, last 6 years in Mongolia, can be elected as president. The other thing in terms of judge, court system, long-awaited also, there is a general council of court, and consisting of 10 persons. 5 will be elected from among the judges, and another 5 will be open election, selection, and the nomination. And each judge will be only nominated for 4 years, 1 term. And the head of this council will be elected among the members, not separate person. So this kind of change. The other thing I particularly would like to highlight is we call it double del, meaning that the parliament member can be also cabinet member up to now. Now 18 members, ministers we call, then they can be all by today double del having, and but from tomorrow it will be only 4 of them, and the prime minister will have a right hire and fire the cabinet members without any approval of the parliament. That's the main changes we are expecting from tomorrow to noon, according to the amendments of the Mongolian constitutions.
Okay, thank you for that. Although there is more we have to discuss, we have to go to our next topic about housing program and mortgage loan. The Bank of Mongolia made a decision to implement a mortgage program with 8% interest rate, and a total of 240 billion Mongolian tugrik will be invested, provided by both Mongolian banks, Bank of Mongolia and commercial banks of Mongolia. This mortgage program will support mostly low and middle income groups starting from this month, and it will end at the end of 2020. So our first question is that this mortgage loan program was stopped because of lack of funding, but the Bank of Mongolia said that it will continue until the end of 2020. So how is it being financed?
Well, this continuation of the program that we found not sustainable before and stopped from the beginning of this year, restarted now. Mostly we consider, the civil society considers that as more election campaign work, because it starts from May now and to the end of this year only. A Mongol bank, which is supposed to be independent from the government, they do follow what they're proposing, and they made a special resolution recently which says that Mongol bank will issue 120 billion tugriks to commercial banks. 10 or so banks, they will receive money. Some will receive 20, 25, depending on assets, whatever. Then they will match the money on their side. In total, with 8%, they will issue a mortgage, a loan to citizens. And they have particular restrictions. For example, per citizen, per household who receives a loan should not be more than 100 million tugrov, which is about, very one small room, 1 bedroom apartment current price today. And then also 25% of all this financing to be in rural areas. And another one is, all this one is to be for new mortgages, not the old one. And 15% of the total financing is to go to workers of state services and state special services, etc. And the new regulation says of Mongol Bank that first time, the people who receive, the household receiving the loan, 30% of collateral is to be paid. But this collateral from now can include also another real estate belonging to this household or related people. So that in that way, they makes it easier for people to be covered by this mortgage loan.
So there will also be a housing program for health sector workers and civil servants. So how will this program will be implemented?
Well, this program of mortgage loan particularly covers, as you said, peoples of health sector and state special services. Why? Because now we are in the war with the enemy that we cannot see, and the soldiers are not people with military or ranks and the weapons and the rifles, but the soldiers are the people in the white guns, in the masks. So these people, many of them work day and night, and for the public interest. So those people to be rewarded as much as possible by the society. That's what the cabinet is suggesting, according to the speaker of the government cabinet. 13 or 1,500 houses, those are being constructed or finished, will be provided to those who are working in this healthcare sector with fighting with coronavirus and state special services. I mean, meaning here is the police who are making sure that the public order is there at the time of quarantine. So, but however, it is easier said than done, because the Ulaanbaatar, there is a housing corporation head by Mr. Sukhbaatar, who said that last time when in nearby the current airport, about 1,000 apartments residence was distributed, and they got about 35,000 requests for that. So it is 35 per household for one small apartment, which is given for rent, and after rent they can own. And so you can imagine how difficult it's going to be for 1,500 people, and probably how many the demand will be there. So it is not that easy.
So housing policy and housing program in Mongolia is entirely dependent on the mortgage loan at the moment. So, but not everyone can qualify for this mortgage loan. So what kind of changes were made in this new program, President?
Well, in this new program, they're suggesting to give it to particular sectors, workers, families, etc. But however, we should say that this housing mortgage program of Mongolia is not sustainable, as it was initiated by Mongol Bank, and which had issued cash to commercial banks. And Mongol Bank could not have on commercial activity first. It is not it is business. That's why. Plus, when the commercial rate in the market rate in the country of a loan is 20%, they were issuing a loan for 3% to commercial banks, which have increased into 8% to the final lender. And this difference is being observed by the all who is paying taxes. And plus, central bank was a long time ago wanted to transfer all these assets to the budget, which have been not received, etc., etc. So it was not sustainable program, meaning that the whole taxpayers pay money to those who's paying a lower rate for the housing. Yet these people who are paying through taxes, they want to have their own houses. So it's just kind of a program where you get money from all of the people and pay. Today there are some 80,000+ people are under this program, and it is done through also a Mongolian Hypothec Corporation, Hypothec Mortgage in Mongolian and Russian. So this Hypothec Corporation has issued bond against the proceeds they will receive from the ordinary people to pay their loans, and they have issued bond to commercial banks, central bank, 90% owned by 90%, the central bank, 10% by the commercial bank. So actually, this is not when the market rate is about 20%. It's very hard to sustain this level of mortgage with only 8% when there is no proper there's no proper mechanism that absorbs that differences. So it's very hard and very hard to sustain, and because it's hard because it is usually paid by more domestic or foreign debt of the government, which is worsening the situation where we have a lot foreign debt, and the government has to pay from next year already a substantial amount of that foreign debt by billions of dollars.
So how will this mortgage loan program be improved? And do you think this is the last time the government will initiate something
No, because the term that starts in May and finishes to the end of the year, and we independent people, economists, consider that as like more campaign financing, promotion, election promotion actions by the ruling party, because otherwise, if it is truly sustainable, why they should go for this program only for 7 months of the year.
I see. So let's get into our third topic for today, and about what is government and civil society partnership. The civil society organizations and associations of Mongolia have developed the government and civil society partnership concept. So our first question is that how likely is the partnership between the government and civic society will be approved?
Well, let me share with you the story behind this law, because the current power, ruling party, People's Party government had proposed, the previous written but government, Ministry of Justice had proposed a law that regulates and limits civic society activity in the country, quoting that there are so many of some 50 or so thousand organizations, NGOs for the small population, and many of them are not regulated, and we don't know what are they doing. We don't see even their financial report, etc. And it was the same argument by Poland and Hungarian governments, recent governments. These two countries were regarded as a front line of democracy before. Then suddenly their governments made a special law restricting the civic society, and Mongolians want to do the same. So there was a huge discussions. All public NGOs were gathered together and made several sessions, and they were against, for example, some provision like state will provide, they call it support for NGOs through NGO support fund, which will be run by the government. So through this support system or funding, government wants to control, that's the civic society is fine, control the civic society and civic rights of our people. So they were discussing that law very long. Then after a certain time, they were quoting the concept of partnership, state and civic society, drafted in 2012. So let's, first of all, in order to make our life easier, let's approve first this concept, which is adopted in which is drafted in 2012. So the civic societies group, they have been discussing with the state government, and they have been approving, they have been amending this concept, which was from the time of Su Batpol time government. And now the idea is, let's first of all, let's approve that one. Then let on go to the law. That's the situation.
So do you think that this concept will be approved? And how will this affect the civic society of Mongolia if this is approved?
Well, concept itself was also worked out by civil society representatives and the government representatives. And relatively, this is the concept that will be the base of the following laws, which basically needs the government finds to control, to regulate, in particular, they say religious organizations, This country has a freedom of religion, and many religions all over the world, the religions are almost in Mongolia. And some people are concerned about possible conflicts, what's happening also around the world, and having certain damage to the national unity and raising certain concerns. That's regard to the religious organizations. There are other organizations through which, say, for example, there was a not very clear financial activity, etc. So there were zillions of reasons to consider to try to control the civic society. But the civic society are against that tone of language they're using, over the civic society from the state side, more ruling, more demanding. It is not as a partner's language. So in order to have our democracy stronger, we need equal level of partnership of state and civic society. They should be as equal partners, having the same full right. In short, this is the level of maturity of Mongolian democracy, and meanwhile we don't want through these laws to lose that civic freedom we have in this country, in particular when we have in our two neighbor countries. Now in Mongolia they start to make zillions of cameras, for example, in the streets to recognize individuals, etc. Okay, we understand this is for security, safety, against terrorism, etc. But where is the guarantee that these informations of personal private informations will not be leaked, will not be misused by the law enforcement agencies? So, for example, that civic society needs to fight for the privacy law. We have a full right to. It's not unlike many totalitarian countries. We are for the civic society for fighting against terrorism and for safety, security of the citizens, but don't want to have this information or these techniques used against our privacy.
So could you tell us very briefly that what does Mongolian civic societies lack compared to
Lack is a good question, because lack is the involvement by all citizens. Still, these organizations, the thousands of them, are still run by a few individuals, 1, 2, 3, 10 maybe. But in general, this awareness of Mongolian citizens that the democracy means our participation in decision making, in the process of preparation of our laws, in the process of implementation, then monitoring. And if all we don't speak together, or we don't express our views, then the state will do only they go on their own way. But the state has a particular disease. It has internal sickness of wanting to be always bigger, larger, and that are taking our space of freedom in terms of our money we spend, because they keep increasing consumption of the state, in terms of freedom that we express. So that's why in Mongolia the number one issue of civic society is equal and wide participation, broad participation of Mongolian citizens.
Okay, thank you for that. And unfortunately, that is all the time we had for today. We will see you next week with more topics.
Thank you very much. Have a
nice
good
evening.
evening.
Goodbye.
One is the fund of